Today I have a special guest, and I'm going to be introducing Morgan. And Morgan, I wanted to read something from your website. I guess you call yourself a life coach. Is that how
we get called many things. There's really no name for what we do, but life coach is kind of the closest thing. I think the difference is life coach, people think they tell you how to live your life. We just want to tell you where you can live it from.
Okay, I love that. So the truth of who you are may be hidden behind anxiety, depression, or feelings of low self-worth. But when you spend time with black sheep thinkers around you, a new world will open to you. Do you want to talk about like what inspired that specifically for you to write, and kind of what your clients, what they gain from their experience with you?
Yeah, sure. So it's like a two-pronged question. So let me see.
I like two-parters.
Yeah. And so black sheep thinking kind of opened up because I wasn't a very functional human at one point, and I was struggling with abandonment from my real father and being assaulted my last year of school and learning disability that was diagnosed after I flatlined, and all these things that occurred. And then I kind of shifted my life, graduated college with a 4.0, went to university, got a degree in psychology, and we did a charity, all this stuff. And then that was the time of my life where I had everything I thought I needed, but still wanted to kill myself. And so, so all this success and on paper, and I was like, wow, I still feel horrible.
But in here, you didn't feel that.
Yeah, I just felt like, you think if you get everything you want, that maybe you'll be approved by people and you'll be accepted and you'll be happy. And it was very fleeting. It wasn't sticking. And so my mom called one time when we did our toilet paper charity. We raised 1 million rolls of toilet paper across Canada. And cool. She said, "You're such a black sheep." And I said, "Mom, that's the outcast of the family." And that's when she said, "Black sheep have rare wool, and they're never used for their meat. They live long and luxurious lives. Your mind is your wool." But it took me like 3 more years of searching through psychology and self-help and religion and all sorts of spots where people try to find help to realize that this wasn't my mind, my brain, that my mind was what I was. Yeah. And that came to me through a friend a long time ago who I had played basketball with on the same team, and he started his own search, and then he flatlined and came back from a temporary death experience. He doesn't call it a near death because he calls it a brief death experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he came back and started talking to me about what he experienced, and it kind of resonated where I was when I was 5 and it occurred, and started looking for, talking more about what this thing is when our identities die. And so we noticed that like there's a part of us that can love really easily when we get out a story. So an example of that's easy is when our children, anytime we're around children, not even ours, they are certainly imperfect in behavior at times, right? Because they're learning how things work. Yeah. But like how hard is it to love them when they're born? How much effort does it take to love your children? None. And so when we help people understand there's a place inside of us that has no story, has no dialogue about who people are and creating conditions, then that is what exists. And so we help people understand that they can love themselves that way and other people from that same spot. Yeah. And the more time people spend time with us and wake up to that, they put down the one self they know the most, which is the self of thinking and working and recording information through our brain and experience, and then having likes and dislikes and desires and anxiety and stress. Yeah. And they put that down, then they wake up to another type of experience that is an innate intelligence that allows us to create from a place of truth, a place of ease, a place of love.
Kind of from not what society tells us.
Yeah, it is very different, and that's sometimes the scary part of our work is that we walk into situations and go against pretty much everything that everyone else is saying, not to be different, but psychology is not working. Yeah. Over 150 years of research, and we're the most medicated society, the most suicidal.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have to look at it honestly and be like, it does work for some people. Positive psychology is better than negative psychology, but it's not sticking. Why isn't it taking hold? And so we started looking everywhere. Like I really did go on a search. I looked for, religion.
Can you begin like where your search was? Like you said, you like went into religion.
Yeah, I was baptized as a Mormon. My mom sought religion after I flatlined, and she's like, "God, reveal yourself to me." And so the Mormons knocked on her door like the next day, and she's like, "It's a sign." And, but I didn't stick with just the Mormon religion. By the time I was 16, I started going to every other church that I could find, because why would this church have the truth? What's
compared to the others?
Yeah. So I wanted to have an open look. So my mom was really sweet to be able to let me go to every church, from Pentecostal, Holy Roaster, Catholic, mosque.
Wow.
I've always kind of, and then I started looking into psychology, obviously, when I went to Trent University and seeing where that held, and that just brought more depression and labeling. And
it's almost, it almost doesn't serve you very well at times, right?
It's just, there's a lot of labels there that.
Yeah.
It sounds like, though, like one of the things, I mean, I do know your story and we've spent some time together, and I think we should start like a wow counter for Tamara in this episode.
I feel like I've already said, I'm like Owen Wilson. I'm like, wow.
But
wow.
I think one of the things that is a theme that I've heard you say really often, and it sounds like you've always been this way, even like in your darkest times, is the stay curious. And the fact that you've like spent a lot of time just being really open-minded to be curious in what that journey looks like for you, I think being
really curious is terrifying as well.
Yeah, it can have its moments, because a lot of people don't think there is an outcome. So I always ask people, like, I think many of us are on this search to feel better about this experience, because we don't know why we're here, what's going on,
Yeah.
or why things
Why
happen.
are we here? Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
And the problem is that I think two things. One is people give up hope that there is a solution. And I think number two, I always wonder, for the people who are searching, how do they know if they find it?
Yeah.
Right.
How would they know if they found it? So like, there's people that find, very few, like there's a small percentage they find this, but they're so addicted to self-help. They're so addicted to that culture of like, that, motivation and inspiration that's temporary fix, that they could skim past it if they're not careful, and like really see that the answer isn't outside of you. The answer is you.
Yeah.
The answer is connecting to what you really are. And most people, even they think of the concept of spirituality, it's like this woo-woo thing that's out there.
Yeah.
And you see it sometimes where you bump into someone who no just a yoga or anything, but they're like, I'm in yoga, I'm a floater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
the Zen.
oh, they're so spiritual.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's not spirituality to us. It's just really a relationship with yourself, which is the only relationship that matters.
It's true.
Because the rest come for free.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we create our reality through our thoughts, and we try to control our thoughts, which works against the programming. Our brains are very negative, not because we're negative people, but they're risk managers. This spacesuits taught us, like, don't die. Be careful. Don't offend.
Yeah. Would you say that's their like evolution a little bit, because we were taught like we have to
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't
survive?
it makes sense. I mean, like, think about if your brain didn't have that feature, we'd be walking off cliffs like lemons.
Well, absolutely. There would be no
porcupines and-
yeah.
There'd be no safety, essentially.
Yeah.
But I think it's gotten too far with that we're not evolving fast enough, because society's evolving so quick that now it's not like, don't eat that berry or hug that animal. It's like, don't offend, don't get canceled, don't lose your job.
Yeah.
It's like all those things.
Right.
Be careful you don't say the wrong words around people. And then we start to like create this, fear, and then our brain doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived
That's
threat.
right.
And then
Okay.
we react that way. So
I agree. I resonate with that very much.
We can't differentiate. Yeah.
Especially like fear in relationships, for sure. When you talk about, and I've heard you talk about it as well, like, we are not our thinking, and also like breaking down ego.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of like the goal of like one of your initial sessions, is like talking about like breaking down an ego. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What's the goal?
So instead of going, instead of going into the programming automatically, connecting people to the operating system, because the programming is our thinking, and we're trying to will that the opposite. So it's like, for example, if I'm being negative because I'm worried about a relationship, I'm worried about what people think about me when I manage my kids or love my child or whatever. Am I being a good parent? Am I being a good worker? Rather than trying to be positive and be like, I am a good worker, I am a good parent, which doesn't seem sustainable. You can't fool the ego. Going into the operating system and opening up to recognize, like, it doesn't matter, and that you're okay, and that you can come from a place of truth. Because not that I like to be, who doesn't like to be right in arguments, but I'm not talking about it from that perspective. Instead of trying to think to be right, come from the only place that is right. Tell me when love, compassion, kindness, the words that kind of represent the feeling when we're in the operating system, when is that wrong?
Yeah.
So when we come out of our heads and into our hearts, I'm
Yeah.
air quote it because it's not really our heart, but that's the where we feel it. That place knows what to do in every situation.
Right.
And it knows. There's a place that knows how to show up to fear and how to put things down, right? And how to like, okay. So, I mean, if you want to give an example, we can kind of use that as how, the truth of who we are would navigate it. I used to plan all my talks, or when I used to go into sessions, I'd have like framework, and then my coach was like, stop doing that. I'm like, but then what will happen? How do I do it? It's like you just show up and respond to what shows up.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's
You
where
feel the
we
room.
show up.
Yeah.
Right.
It's where we show. It's where we show up from that allows us to navigate. Because when we get into strategies with kids, like there's really no strategy except for just to be loving and compassionate.
Just nurturing in
just
nature.
nurture.
It comes
Right.
down to the whole concept of that. Just showing
And
up for
also
them.
goes back to fear about how like there's like all the things that you're going to worry about, you know, because we come from like a negative place of thinking that like they're not going to probably come true.
Right.
And that you just have to like, I think that's one of the things that we've
And
taken
that's all
away
identity.
too, is letting
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, that's
really.
your identity. You creates hopes and dreams, and then scares the hell out of itself that it won't get it, and then it will never be enough to have what we really want.
Right.
Rather than showing up present in our presence, right? Because our presence is, we're always present, but the presence is the opportunity to like outwards look and dissolve who you are.
Yeah.
Think about how your life would look differently if you didn't take yourself in consideration every time you spoke.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That just blew my mind. I was like, yeah.
I hope they like me.
Yeah.
I mean, we always kind of
I mean, we want to be liked, right?
But I don't need it, nor do I, because I can't control that.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
I can control is my output, and then if I come from it and I'm looking at the person, then my love is expressed this
Yeah.
way, rather than I'm loving you to get something back, rather than I'm loving you because I have needs. And so patience isn't waiting, it's having no need.
I think because if you, like what I'm hearing you say is essentially like you have to always just be like coming from a place of like gratitude and like truth. And if, you know, and people can
it's
receive
not
that
perceived.
how they'll receive it, and you don't have control over that.
Yeah.
And
I'll take it a step further than that.
yeah.
Yes, gratitude and truth, but don't push it up into your psychology. You are gratitude. You are truth. You
Okay.
are love. So you don't have
We
to
have
try.
all these things.
That's what we are, though.
Yeah.
It's not even
Yeah.
like we have those things. We are those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we are that, like, look at a child. Do they need to be taught gratitude?
No,
Really? No.
it
They
comes.
appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do they need to be taught how to love? Do they need to be? They show up and experience life from a place of. If you tell them to dance, they might be a bad dancer, but they dance like they're the best.
Yeah.
And they don't worry about that.
It's that environment that structures them
It's
as they
who
go on
they
in
are.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't. And then later on in life,
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, I can't dance because I'm not good."
Yeah.
Right. You're right. And so it's like what we start to teach people: who were you before you thought you learned who you were?
Yeah.
Who were
Right.
you before you were conditioned to think you were something else and had
Yeah.
to change who you were? Because that's the thing. I don't think many of us really are ourselves. We're a fabricated version
You're
of who
so
we are.
right. And we're fabricated versions with different people, I find.
Yeah, maybe. And then so what if we killed all those fake versions?
Yeah.
What would be left over? But the fear is if they don't accept this fabricated version of us, how could they ever accept the real us? Because that fabricated version is shiny and has ribbons and
Yeah.
sparkles. And then we're just a piece of donkey crap in behind, we think, but
Yeah.
we're not.
Yeah.
I can
We're not.
picture right now when I think of this, when I think about like stripping all of that away, my first like place in my mind goes like, well, I'm nothing, but I can hear you saying, no, you are everything.
You're both.
Yeah.
You're both. You are nothing and everything. And you are, because you're the creation of nothing but everything at all at once. Like that's the beauty of it. It's this nice yin and yang of,
Right.
we are smart and dumb. We
Yeah.
are beautiful and ugly.
We're
We are
bites.
givers and takers. And you have to be the whole. We shame part of being human and then wonder why we don't feel complete.
Yeah.
You can't shame half of who you are and think that you're ever going to be a whole person by leaning on only the preferable side.
Yeah.
Right. The, like,
Because we only
palatable
want the good
side.
stuff.
Of course, we all want to be seen as good
Yeah.
because we want to be accepted and safe and successful.
Yeah.
But I find like that pushes people away. And that was my experience. It's like
Yeah.
I was all
It's
the
like
shiny
genuine.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I not getting what I want? I was all the dark stuff and then I became all the light stuff. It's like because you have to bring them together and be complete.
Yeah.
And that feels safer.
Yeah.
It's more honest. It's
Scary because you're being vulnerable.
vulnerability is just you trying to defend your identity. When you kill that, there's no such thing. But I see, I hear what you're saying, because that's like
Yeah.
a very, when Brene Brown says we have to practice vulnerability, I'm like, that doesn't make, or practice authenticity, she says. I'm
Yeah.
like, that doesn't make any sense. You can't
Yeah.
practice authenticity.
Right.
It just, yeah. Comes.
You just are that.
Yeah.
And when we accept what we are without our story, when we accept what we are without trying to build who we think we need to be loved by the world,
Yeah.
the world starts to feel safe around us. And then you'll receive not just more people potentially, but the right people,
Right.
which is more important to me than more, right? The people
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
have to try around, the
Yeah.
people you're safe around.
That don't suck the energy out of you. That's
Right.
like you for me. Like I feel like you
Wearing
don't
a-
suck energy out of you.
Same
Right?
here. Me too.
Oh, get out of here, Joey.
Me too.
But it is true because you just feel so much
Because
lighter
there's
with
no
certain
like
people.
thinking. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
no like thinking.
Yeah.
I don't leave. Yeah.
So what if you could become the person, or anyone who's listening, become the person that creates the opportunity where you can meet more people that don't suck the energy out of you because you're that side. You can only control your side.
Right.
So you create the opportunity, but we don't, because we think we have to put a barrier to guard, and we have conditions on our love.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But conditions on your love for others is just a reflection of how many conditions often we have on ourselves.
Right.
So I'll ask clients in our first meeting when they just meet, which is really kooky, but like, do you love me? And the response is always interesting, and I know from their response how they
What
respond.
was Joe's response?
Joe's
Yes.
response was,
It
yeah,
was
man.
yes.
And
Of course.
Will
he
you
would.
marry me?
Yeah, man.
and mine was, I don't even know you.
I don't even know
Yeah.
you.
Mine was no.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. But the response is always essentially the same, because you're coming back to the same thing of like, Joe's like, well, you're like how, like, you love me, but you don't love yourself. And then your response to me was, you don't love yourself. How could you love me?
Yeah, it can be the same. I've had people say they do love themselves, but maybe they do love me. But yeah, often it's, if you can't love others, and we think love is such a loaded word in the English language, because it's like, yeah, I love my wife, my kid, my friends, but I don't want to say there's different love, but it is like, a spectrum of connect, but it's the same place for me. That's the difference. Love is, I accept you as you are.
Yeah.
I don't care what you've been through. I don't care who you are. I'm not going to carry a story, nor do I need to create a gate. But that people think if they love them, they bring them in their lives and hold on to them and cling to them. And that's why they
won't
feel
leave.
unsafe. Yeah, don't leave me. I'm not going to love you because I've been hurt before when I've been loved. And I'm like, well, I love all my exes. I love all my enemies. I love all my friends. I might not want to spend weekends with them. I might not like, and I have discernment to think, who do I want to spend time with? The universe might be saying, they're not ready to spend time with right now, and that's okay. But I don't have to be like, I hate them now because they didn't make me feel the way I wanted to feel
In that moment,
And so that's unconditional love. And when you have that in you to accept people where they're at in their journey, that means you can accept yourself.
Okay.
And it's the rejection of self that gets in the way of experiencing the truth of who you are.
That's good.
I agree with that. I mean, to catch everybody up, like, we have been working with Morgan a little bit. We've spent some time together, you and I. We've had some ups and downs, and you've been really patient.
I've had no downs.
With me. We've had some words, but you've been really patient with me, and I need that. And I think, like, one of the things that, like, I was just like, the last time we talked, I was so mad. I was so defensive. And I was just like not in an open place at all. And like the longer I spent with you and the more that you like challenged me on like what it actually was about, the more I just like broke down. And since we've talked, like, I feel like my life has actually changed so much.
Just like a weight he's broke you, like a weight has lifted.
That like and I mean, I know that there's still work to do, and I know that it's not going to be linear, and I know that there's going to be moments that are difficult, but like, I was talking about like all the things that I love. I'm like, I love my home. I love my kids. I love our house. I love this. I love that. And you're like, well, why aren't you happy? And it's just when we talked about like creating like the environment that we want to have. And I think like it is, letting go of past, letting go of expectations.
Well, it's letting go of the shield that prevents us from experience, because the same thing that keeps the bad stuff away is keeping you away from what you want, right? Like a wall is a wall no matter what. Wall protects you from the bad guys, but it also isn't a prison. It's a prison for you.
We were like heated, and you're like, why don't you want to be happy? Like, and I was like, I fucking do. And you're like, no, you don't. Like, no, you don't. In your way. Like, no, you don't. And I see that now. Like, I see that really clearly, that like I have been standing in my way, and like, I am like not the past, and like my relationships are not the past. Like, I do want to be present, and like things have been really positive. At home, and like it's been great. And
gosh, you make me cry.
It's really it's been a really big impact. Like, and I know that like I'm sure there's moments that you're like, what the fuck, Kate? Like,
no, I don't have any judgment, but I always worry sometimes because I want to make sure I'm really cautious. It's hard sometimes to challenge people.
Yeah.
To the point where we were on that phone and I was like,
I know.
I'm not stepping down, and neither are you.
I liked the challenge, and I needed that. I really needed that. And this is what I'll say. Like, one thing that has been different in my experience with you, not that I've even like dived into the point that other people have, but I've been going to counseling. Like, I've been in counseling almost,
well over
9
a year
months.
now.
Almost a year, I think. Almost a year. I've done like psychotherapy stuff, just like dabbled in it. but I've never been like held accountable.
Yeah, they can't do that.
Yeah, I've never been held accountable or like actually challenged on like my own behavior, my own thinking, and how that was making me suffer.
Yes.
And I know that you've done a lot of work with Joe, and I hope that's okay that we're talking about. And like Joe's
Joe's an
had
open book
such a
too.
great experience with you and like your time together. And like, I'll also never forget that, like, because in the moments of like what I'm going through, I'm like when I was talking to you, I was like, I'm fucking suffering. Like I feel suffering. Like I am like in pain. I'm feeling this. And you're doing all this work with Joe, and you were like, I can't create an angel and send him back to hell.
And then she's like, is he calling me hell?
I was like, but he
I go, well, yeah, maybe. I think so.
Yeah.
And like,
you're not hell. But
and then here I am.
This thing is hell.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but like, it took me a minute because I'm like, well, like, fuck this. Like, I'm suffering. Like, I'm in pain. Like, I'm struggling. Yeah. And then that like took me back as we like talked more about like, creating that environment and just being able to like accept love and accept what I need and want.
Yes. Yeah. And be able to create, and that your suffering made sense from a place of thinking.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that we're crazy. It's just that we can make ourselves crazy by trying to, Einstein says you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. For me, that was always like, you can't fix your broken brain with your broken brain. But we're not broken. We feel broken because we're trying to use a tool that's limited.
Yeah.
And we don't realize there's another source of experience beyond that, because no one ever teaches us that, hey, there's a you underneath that thinking.
Right.
There's a you that isn't been
Tap
told.
into that you.
Yeah, the real you. Because it has a voice. It just doesn't have a mouth to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The most noble thing your brain will become eventually will be an interpreter for your spirit.
Okay.
An interpreter for who you really are.
Yeah.
Your
Right.
consciousness, whatever word people want to use, because spirit's sometimes connected to religion, which we're not. So,
Right.
or some dogma, but like this essence of what we are, it knows how to show up. Like when you're at a grocery store and you see an elderly person fall down or drop something, do you think, do they deserve for me to help them right now? Or you just respond?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a place in us that knows how to show up with others and ourselves without judgment.
Right.
From the right place.
Yeah.
From a place that we feel. When we do service work, when we do charitable work, or you see your child, show up, do you feel that place inside of you that's like, oh,
yeah, absolutely.
That's us.
That shivers.
We think it's caused by the outside, but it's us waking up. Okay. And when you hear something sometimes where you're like, you felt a ping of like, that feels good. That's the real you saying, that's the stuff. Listen to that. Right?
Tune into that
rather
a bit more.
than our brain that's like, oh, that makes me feel, there's also those memes or bad wisdom that make us feel good in the second, but just reconfirms where we're at.
Right.
Just like, no one gets to be as hard on me as me. I'm hard on me and no one gets to judge me. And it's like, so you don't think others should judge you, but you beat yourself up from that same level of their judgment. So that sounds right in the moment, maybe. Because you're like, but
well, I like the exercise that you did too. Like Joey's been like showing me some of the exercises.
We have like a what would Morgan do like
in
the house
evening,
right now. Honestly, I'm like, I talked to Tamara.
That's both.
And, I'd really like to know what Morgan was saying.
Yeah, what about my life situation? Like, wait until you hear about mine. Oh my goodness! But
open the Morgan box.
Yeah, or I say to my mom too. I'm like, okay.
What you're really asking is, what would the real you do, though?
Yeah,
because it's not what would Morgan do. Morgan's
but I feel
human too.
It all like
you're guiding us in finding that.
Right. And that's it. But then it's like, what would the Sherpa do to get you up the mountain? No, you're walking up the mountain. I just want to unpack until you put that down, pick this up. This is not something often talked about. It has to be experienced.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's why we spend time. And it sounds, because talking about the invisible, I opened my talk one time, I said, because what we talk about is like trying to describe the taste of salt, but without saying the word salty.
Okay.
And so it's and there's lots of words we've come up with to describe this feeling.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't want to go back to the Morgan box. This is interesting.
Well, and we were talking and they were using the example of, a child is approaching you and they fall. What do you say?
We've done quite a few exercises in the living room.
I love that. And start charging you a fee for
Yeah, Joey will like literally sit me down and be like, okay, so
like
imagine this. And like I go on a trance. But it's true though.
Yeah,
like
we dimmed the lights and everything.
When you do have when a child is essentially approaching you, your inner good yourself, you're like, instantly pick up, help,
Nurture.
you're okay, nurture.
Yep.
And then for yourself, you're like, get the fuck up.
Yep.
Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing again? You're falling again.
Yeah, look at what people are going to think of you. You're embarrassing me.
Yeah.
You got to be better than this.
Yeah.
You know, the inner voice. And so we always ask, like, you know, that inner critic doesn't really exist, but the brain only knows how to be that.
Yeah.
It will sometimes be nice and lure you in, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're good. But if you think about it, like, what voice did your inner critic speak before it learned English?
So I'm interested to know, like, how you perceive trauma on the brain. Like, how do you...
Yeah. So Adler's the closest thing in psychology to, like, Freud and Carl Jung. Their stuff's been disproven, and Carl Jung work's not bad. It has like shadow work, but Adler said, like, there's no such thing as trauma long term.
What's shadow work? First off.
Shadow work. Yeah. So shadow work is Carl Jung does shadow work where they take a look in the past at something that occurred.
Okay.
And you see your inner shadow within it. So something that you're trying to hide to the world. So a shadow is what you're trying to hide.
Okay.
So like, oh, I did something that was selfish. I don't want to be seen that way.
I'm going to just hide.
Bury it.
Yeah.
And then it eats it at me. So it's taking a look at both your light and your shadow. We do that. Carl Jung just focuses on shadow work, which is great to heal for a bit. But then after that, you're just every week looking at what a piece of crap you think you are, and it just gets redundant. Like, how many times can you be like, my dad did it, you know, whatever, or I wasn't enough, and then not grow? And so Adler believed that traumas occur, obviously. We all go through really hard things. Carrying it forward, they say that there's no such thing as trauma long term.
Okay.
That holding on to trauma long term starts to, because again, you're reopening Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And your brain doesn't know the difference between the trauma that occurred, which we have to heal from, right? So I had met a woman who, I meet many women in different situations. Unfortunately, they've been sexually assaulted. Yeah. And I had a woman she was sexually assaulted when she was 16. She was 46, been married since she was in her 20s. Yeah. And never had any real intimacy with her husband because she would go back into that. Yeah. And so I asked her how many times in her life she was raped. She said once. I said, it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it's occurred. Yeah. Like more every time you think about it, because your brain doesn't know the difference between that moment and then the victimization of that moment by reopening it. Yeah. So we have to heal from that moment, but then we want to recognize, like, in this current moment, we are safe and can create what we want. Yes. Rather than using the past as an excuse to become something. An excuse might not be the right word, but that's what Adler says, is carrying it with us and then making that part of our identity. Okay. So it describes a situation, but it can't define us in the long run, because anything that's ever occurred, when you see the purpose in it, that if it is about being hurt or about loss, if you think about it, someone came back into your life, like you lost a loved one, if you were in the opposite situation, that you were the one that was lost, but you could talk to them, what would you say? Well, I know that if I passed away and I had to talk to my son, I'd be like, I'm good. Yeah. Stop ruining your life or being sad. That makes it harder on me because I can't be there. I want you to live free. Yeah. I want you to live free and happy and celebrate your life, and I'll see you soon. Yeah. Yeah. And so trauma is tough if we hold on to it. I mean, there's a difference between trauma in the moment where we experience something horrendous, triggers, and then long term, how do we heal, which is not holding on. But we think if we let go of the trauma, sometimes we say, well, then that makes it okay that it happened. No. Or that we're going to forget the people we love. No. We're going to be able to honor them and ourselves more because the best way to live your life after something bad is to be incredibly happy. That's the best testimony. That's the best, we're quoting the word revenge, because the quote is, the best revenge is to live a happy life if someone's hurt you. Yeah. And if it's through loss, then it's celebrating our lives as a testament to what it is, rather than them seeing us as like, oh man, like, it would have been better if I wasn't around because look how hurt they are. And I see that with a lot of people with parents and children, when we have losses, like, we think that it's hard to separate the pain from not having from the celebration of life, being like, how can I be happy? Well, because that's the best testament to our relationship. If you guys come to my funeral as I get older and you cry, I'll be so pissed off. You're allowed to cry for one day, but after, because there is a detachment of reality. Yeah. But I want you to move into a place of celebration that we've met, and make fun of me, and maybe talk about stuff that made your life better, because I don't want you to suffer. Life is so short, and some shorter for us, for others than us, that why waste a second on something that's out of your control and part of the human condition. Like, we're meant to go through hard things. I ask people this: if I could delete a part of your past, but you lost all the wisdom and insight around it, what would you delete? Wow. What would you remove, knowing you lost the wisdom and the insight? What part of your past would you delete completely? And now some people, it depends where they are on the stage of acceptance, but when 99% of people, I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's helped me prove my merit. It's allowed me to grow and be who I am
Yeah, and
today.
you change your perspective on life.
I feel like
you
at the
know?
same time, though, we've had this conversation before, but now I'm like, I could also delete everything. Right?
Start over.
know what I
You're like,
mean?
let's start over.
Fresh little baby me.
Like,
We can
nothing and everything. Because really, though, like, what does any of it really matter? Nothing, because hopefully I would just be content and happy.
Well, because there is part of spiritual evolution of who you are, that
Right.
there's wisdom to understand. So let's imagine, I don't know, like, we're talking right out of my hat, but it's like this. Let's say I'm like Ned Flanders and I go to the Simpsons version of heaven and I'm like, Oakley, Dokley, I made it. And
That's good.
and
That
he
was
goes,
really good.
and they say, okay, so can I get into heaven? They go, no, man. I'm like, but I live perfect. It's like, yeah, that's the issue. You had to go down and learn why to be perfect. You can't just make that choice. We have to understand that it sucks when you let someone down. It sucks when you don't take an appreciation of yourself or let yourself down.
Yeah.
Self-failure is the only real failure you'll ever experience, where you give up on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start to realize that it's all purposeful, that we're not being punished.
Yeah.
Your lessons, the harder thing, name one person you've met that hasn't gone through anything hard that brings value to your life. Anyone I meet who's gone through hard things has a value to bring as part of an understanding of life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that wisdom and insight is worth more. That's why we're here. Everything else is just window dressing. And let's get a cool drink and, whatever, have a nice meal and watch Netflix. But at the end of the day, who do we become and who do we help along the way?
Yeah. And Joy and I were talking about this the other day, like before my daughter had passed away, and I just think like I never used to think and live so mindfully as I do now, or try to be. Like little things would push me over the edge, like very tedious things.
Right. You realize what mattered all of a
Where
sudden.
now I'm like, in that moment when she was dying, like I'm like, nothing fucking matters.
Right.
Nothing like this, nothing so little, like, a missed bill payment or a smudge on the wall or little like super tedious things used to cause me so much anxiety, and now it's just like they don't matter. But like we mentioned this before, is like I'm not the same person either, like after experiencing that trauma and going forward with it as well.
Yeah, and that's not, you face one of the heaviest things, in my opinion, that people can experience next to a sexual assault or something. It's like losing a young child. Like, it's not God's plan. There's nothing to
there's
be
no
said.
reason, and
there's no reason.
And I think that as humans, we want a reason to everything.
We do.
We want
try
to
solve
fix
it.
everything. And my one of my best friends said that the next day, like, some things are just meant to not be solved.
Nothing's meant to be solved.
Like, like
it's all meant to be experienced.
Yeah, there's no right reason to it. So
it's true.
When you have people coming to see you and they are feeling like, I'm sure you get a lot of different people that are coming to see you, a lot of different stages that they're at.
Yes.
Like, what does that look like? So you offer coaching, and I know it's kind of structured in a way that there's a certain...
it's structurally unstructured, yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's structured in a way that, there's a time period that you have, and there's kind of like themes to your session.
Yeah, I don't. So you are my content most times. I always know how I'm going to open, because we're sharing this understanding that we're kind of dipping our toes into today about the difference between who we are with our thinking, and our thinking leads to emotion, and that was where we get stuck. But then we go into another sense of helping them experience who they are, and I try to in the first meeting get them to get a little taste of that, so they can go, oh, this is different. I feel better. I'm like, oh, don't worry, you'll feel like crap by the time like a day will go by. You'll go back into your brainwashing.
Yeah, right.
And then it lasts longer and longer. So we work together for 3 months to kind of roll up, so that instead of just giving you a fish, because I give you the fish the first day, you're starving,
right?
Spiritually or emotionally, and then I'm moving on. We teach you how to fish for yourself, to create it, to bring awareness to it, so you'll never escape the mind completely. But what happens is people go from complaining that 90% of their life they felt like crap when they worked really hard to feel good. They feel good, and then when they feel like they don't want, they know they're in their thinking and how to get out.
Yeah.
Right.
And how to experience their emotions, because we're not shaming emotions. Emotions are awesome.
Yeah.
Just being stuck in them and making them your personality isn't.
Right.
That's the part.
Would you say like you're you say you go through a 3-month journey essentially?
Yeah.
Are you opening up like new thinking waves, new patterns in the brain.
Well, I'm not doing that, but what happens, I think what occurs when we reset from the operating system, then the programming gets reset for free. Rather than fighting the programming, things occur. But we also like challenge old programming and be like, hey, like notice this is happening. Yeah, I don't like that. Right. Well, the answer is getting back into who you are. So in the journey of 3 months, after meeting one, and the last meeting, I have like a beautiful goodbye kind of ceremony because, you know, most of them turn into friends or connections, and they need to not be codependent on me either because it's them, and look back on their journey. But in that middle, whatever occurs, so do we have processes and tools? Yeah, but sometimes clients are like, I never did that. I'm like, well, it wasn't part of your journey. You took a different way up the mountain, and it's all getting to the same place.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I agree with that because even like what I've experienced, I'm like totally different from Joe, and like what has like been easier for him has been harder for me, or what's hard for him might be easier for me. I know that you also do like mentalist stuff.
Oh, like magic stuff, you mean?
Well, yeah, but don't you do like hypnosis stuff too? Yeah.
No, I don't do any of that stuff.
Do you like to be called a magician?
I mean, you might think it is mentalist stuff because I mean, the difference between
I feel like it's mentalist.
Yeah, it can. Some of it can be. If I'm guessing your card
like
that's in your head.
It sounds fancier. When you say
Magician sounds like a song.
I branded that.
Let's take a huge turn here.
I'm a magicianist. I'm a mentalist. Slur the words together.
Because that you integrate some of those things as well.
Yeah, we believe. I got rid of magic when I was in finance because the boss told me it's time to put childish things away. And my coach and great friend Andrew McKee, who's out of it, we call him Arizona because I have too many Andrews in my life, and so all thankful that they exist. But so Arizona, Andrew McKee, he's like, why'd you put down magic? I'm like, oh, you know, they told me that it's lying to people. He's like, what do you know because of magic that nobody knows? I'm like, well, sleight of hand, misdirection. I started using like cliche terms here, and he was like, no, what do you know? And I'm like, I'm telling you what I know.
What do you want from me?
Yeah, I was really, and then finally I was like, I was just kind of, I'll reflect on it. And so I just sat in it. Reflection to me isn't overthinking. It's not thinking at all.
Okay.
We would just propose the question and allow things to.
We don't know how to do that.
propose the question and then like just become quiet. Like to exercise your body, you move it.
Yeah.
To exercise your spirit, you find stillness.
Okay.
And then it will speak to you.
Yeah.
Thanks, dude.
Just like a hand in the frame, like prop man.
And so, so when I find stillness, then it occurred to me, and then sometimes things occur, and you're paying attention because you're bringing awareness to what will come your way. And so it comes my way, and then an old university mate's like, remember when we used to get you to do magic for the girls that came over when we lived together? I was like, yeah, I always wondered, why'd you guys do that? Like, you're making me entertain them and then trying to date them.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it wasn't about impressing them. It's just that we started to see that people will reveal parts of who they are when you show them magic.
Okay.
And they wouldn't realize it. Like when you watch a movie and it makes you cry, you're revealing a part of you.
Yeah.
Because other people might not cry.
Yeah.
But we're so caught up sometimes in the plot.
Tamara cried twice. We went to Garfield. Okay, I took the kids.
It was sad.
And she cried 2 times in it.
Yeah, I cry in
It's
movies.
kid movies. I'm an empath.
Kids
so
movies.
My dad was in the tree.
How
Like,
many times you cry at
every
Bluey? I
time.
cry like 100 times when I watch Bluey.
Constant.
I might cry.
I cry at anything. I know I no shame. I love to cry.
Emotion's good, yeah.
Yeah.
But like happy cries sounds like
Happy
it.
cry. Mad
Sad cry, mad cry.
Sad, look the fuck out cry, you know, all of
If
those
Caitlin
cries.
needs to cry, she'll cry for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And Caitlin, just cry with me. Just let it go.
I'm like, no, I'm okay.
Sit.
Yeah, so the magic kind of opened up a gateway to understand. And I realized magic was a microdose of what we did because I was working. I ended up at a pro bono case at a friend. Their daughter was in a real bad spot.
Yeah.
And she knew me.
Yeah.
And so she said, can you come over and help? And so I sat down with her and she was just like, yep. Yeah, not talking, just really shut off and depressed and suicidal. I was like, do you want to see a card trick? And she went, whatever. And then I did it. And she was like, at the end, she goes, oh, and she freaked out. I'm like, what just happened to your face? Yeah. And she said, I guess I was happy. I'm like, how's that possible? You've been suicidal, sad. She said, I guess I forgot to remember.
Wow.
And that's what's underneath us when we forget to remember. Underneath thinking, our natural state is joy and happiness. You see it in children. We see it in people who are disabled.
Yeah.
They just show, unless their biological needs are overwhelming their senses, like they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, exposed, then they show up as love.
Okay.
I mean, when I coach Special Olympics, we'd be on a fast break. Someone behind them would fall down. They put the ball down, turn around, help them up. Everyone's caught up to half court. But that's such a beautiful thing that you're witnessing that they don't think about. They're just being. And I just want to bring people to that state of understanding of what happens to your life. Because how would your life change if you knew for sure that this is a temporary experience? You're a spiritual being having a human experience, and it's just designed this way, and you're okay.
Yeah.
That you don't need to live in fear.
Okay.
You're okay. And then you open up to it and you're like, and then now you see things purposefully rather than threatening and having to protect yourself.
So many red flags, right? So many threats and
You talked to me the other day, and I think we could talk more about it, about the difference between like being overwhelmed and was it being overloaded?
Yeah. So this is a Steve Chandler bit that I got taught, and I love it because overloaded is when you put too much in your schedule, and that's easy to fix. Go a couple weeks in your schedule, start to book yourself, treat yourself like a client, and start to say no, right? Because every time you say yes to the wrong thing, you're saying no to the right thing. And so we have a limitation of time. So overloaded is really easy when I work with big CEOs in large companies, or even people, everyday business owners like us. They just need to protect who they are, and they forget they matter. So overloaded's easy. Overloaded's easy. Also delegating, like in being like, okay, where is my money? Don't do it. If you're making, $100 an hour, don't work a job. Don't do something in your business that pays you 20.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can take that time back.
Yeah.
And so people used to make fun of me in finance because I paid for house cleaners and I got dry cleaning done. They're like, just do your own dry cleaning. I'm like, it's $50 or whatever, $100 a month.
Yeah.
But I use that time. Imagine the amount of time it would take to starch. I have suits, I have to iron and press. And I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Who knows how to do that?
Yeah. And who has the time really?
Yeah.
Because if that takes
time
5 hours and I'm making, a couple $100 an hour because I'm in that business, well, I'm losing money doing that work.
Yeah.
And people need to leverage it. Now that's easy.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed though is easier in some ways because overwhelmed is a story about we carry energetically.
Yeah.
So overwhelmed is when we start to see life as things rather than a thing.
Yeah.
Like in this moment right now, there's no before or after. There's only us on this couch.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so overwhelmed is a story though. Imagine if I woke up and I'm like, oh, my day, I had to get up, I had to brush my teeth, I had to get ready, I had to deal with my son, I had to talk to my wife, I had to do it. Then we start to become emotionally full because we haven't moved on from the belief of we're not appreciated, or I have too much on my plate, or we're emotionally full. So when I bought my house, things went, my friends came, we did 2 walkthroughs, and we had guys, one of the best builders in Kingston, and Andrew's Pavin is like a carpenter.
Yeah.
They looked at the house like, man, it's move-in ready. And then the hot tub died. And that was a $2,000 bill. And then they didn't take care of the central vac. I had to replace that $1,000. And then it was like my dishwasher got clogged. And then everything started falling apart.
Yeah.
And there was things that needed to be done. I was like,
the money pit.
It felt like the money pit. And so when I showed my house, I'm like, people were like, oh, what do you think of it? I'm like, that bothers me. That bothers me. That bothers me. I started showing what bothered me.
Yeah.
And then finally my washing machine died. The guy washed his mechanic stuff and it clogged and it just froze. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I went to a buddy. I'm like, I hate the house.
Out. Yeah, I'm tapped out.
And he goes, oh, why? What's going on? I said, well, the washing machine, it's going to cost like, $2 or $3 grand to replace them. And it's like, he's like, is that a lot of money? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, is that going to break your family? I'm like, no. And I mean, we're fortunate enough to, no, I wasn't, I do the same thing I taught my clients in finance, not to throw it away on stupid things. Although I still do sometimes because I'm human. Yeah. And so he said, so what is it then?
Yeah.
He goes, I don't know. He goes, I know what it is. I'm like, just tell me then. And he goes, well, if this happened a year from now, would you be upset? I'm like, no, things happen. Things break.
Yeah.
He's like, you haven't healed from the first problem in your house and you started stacking it up.
Yeah.
Become emotionally full. And that's a definition. That's kind of a good example of overwhelm because it's not real.
Yeah.
It's just a story in our heads.
So it's ready to burst.
Yeah. You start to think like, I'm not, and it's usually stems from, I don't think I can handle it. I haven't healed from the first thing, or I don't feel appreciated. And I'm not appreciating myself, rather than like trying to be like, look at all this stuff. I'm like, yeah. But it isn't stuff. It's one thing at a time.
It's a narrative that you're creating.
A narrative you're carrying. You got it. And that creates emotional fullness rather than like, I'm not overwhelmed. So I don't get overwhelmed very often.
Yeah.
Do I get overloaded sometimes? Yeah. Do I need to take time for myself and book myself in? Hell yeah. But I don't really feel like overwhelmed is a real thing.
Yeah.
And you can have an overwhelming moment where everyone's coming at you at the same time. That can, but just carry that with you as part of who you are. It's just a story.
I definitely like recognize looking back at like a period that I would do that to myself. I would overwhelm myself, and did probably stem from not being appreciated. and would pack myself full like on purpose and like be that,
And you
like,
wouldn't accept
victim.
help either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not be able to receive appreciation, because we're like, what does appreciation look like?
Yeah.
We're like, I'm not appreciated. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, they don't have a parade for you, or
Right.
they don't, like, what is, because a lot of people who I meet who feel like they're not loved aren't receiving it, but they're
Right.
giving it.
All
And
the
they're like,
time.
why am I not getting it back? You're like, you're just not able to receive, because a lot of
Yeah,
women,
we talked
especially, I
about that
find
too.
they have this hierarchy where, like, a lot of women who are nurturing, and because there is a difference between men and women and how we
Yes.
naturally are, and they're nurturing givers. And I was raised by a strong single female, so my feminine energy is nicely balanced. And when you give from that place, you love when people receive and you feel good. But then when someone goes to give to you, you see it as, no, I don't take, which creates a hierarchy without realizing it. Like, taking is for weak people. That's what you've been doing. You've been giving, rather than seeing it as giving and taking as equilibrium.
Or I find it's like, oh, you're just doing it because of a reason, or
There's like not trust, or like
It's-
it's coming from genuine place.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's something
That's
that I've
good.
struggled
I
with.
think what like the
Let's talk
appreciation.
more about that.
Well, we can talk about more about that, because all I wanted to say, like, I think like appreciation, it's actually like, it's just like validation.
Yeah. Microdose of connection.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Validation
just, like,
is a
feeling
microdose.
heard and seen.
Yeah, I always joke that like validation is equivalent to a drug of, like, say, a cocaine, where it's like, oh, I feel awake, oh, I need more, oh, I feel awake,
Yeah.
and like validation's like, you want it,
Yeah.
but it never satiates. Notice that, like,
Right.
you've been validated in your life. Why didn't it make you better? But connection is what we're really looking for,
Right.
And we want to be seen, and we want to see others, but sometimes we need to be seen so bad because we feel empty. It's like, it's not about people seeing you. It's about taking a second to recognize you're okay.
Yeah.
And that you don't need to be seen. And then it's like a cherry on top of the sundae.
Wow.
You become the whole thing. Like, you can't go and find love. You are love. And so I was compared to like a ventilator. I was like, so say I had we had ventilators for like asthma.
Yeah.
But because there's no oxygen left in the world, or there's limited, I don't want to jinx this in the future. And now it's like, but mine's made for me only. So you can't use it. You can't use it. And we all have our own. And I ask clients, who would you lend it to? Who would you give it to make sure you got your next breath? And they'll be like, sometimes they'll just say, well, my partner. I'm like, okay, so you're here in a session. I'm like, you're not breathing. I have to call them up. I'm like, get over here. Stop what you're doing. Come over. And then they come over again. Then you leave. And like 2 minutes later, you need your next breath. Because maybe it lasts a minute or an hour. We don't know, because your activity is different sometimes. And we can't predict it. And so now that whole concept is, they realize, I would keep it on me at all times. I never give it away. I'm like, that's love. Yeah. You're the only person who knows why you need it, how much you need it, and for what, and for how long. And so when we start to see that love isn't this third-party action, loving yourself is not a third-party action. That's loving the avatar, which is imperfect.
Yeah.
When you recognize you are love, and that loving yourself is recognizing that that's what we are, then you start to feel whole. And wholeness is better than meanness. Yeah. Because that whole concept of identity will get in the way, because of course identity is fraudulent. We can't be perfect. We're not designed that way.
No.
We're flawed and messed up. And in love is the acceptance of all those things, and then choosing rather than hiding part of it. Yeah. Because when I was diagnosed, after my flat line, they had to test my IQ to make sure that I didn't have brain damage because I had memory loss. And it turned out I was actually gifted. Well, imagine a kid who was struggling in school in grade 7 and 8 being told, oh, you're actually a genius. Well, fool me. My marks in French are horrible. But I was doing university math and all this weird stuff. And I'm like, how do I? And so I would hide stupid in my pocket, and I would just hold that identity piece, not up high, like, hey, everyone, look how smart I am, because I was like insecure about it. So but in my head, I was like, I got to prove I'm smart, and I have to be the fastest. I have to do this. And then stupid will fall out, and either someone would notice it and I'd have shame, or I would notice it and have shame. So it was like, people come to see me under two things, which is either F you or F me, right? So someone sees, you're stupid, and you go F you, or you judge yourself, which is worse almost, like, oh. And so recognizing that I am smart and stupid and putting it together, like, click, oh, I can be both and be okay. I'm human.
Human. That's just it. And I think society,
it's grace.
Social media really plays do you find a big role on our existence?
I think every single thing we've ever created since I've been born has caused a part of it. Because it was before that, it was like TV. Before that, it was parenting, teachers, even religion,
alcohol,
all of it, everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's not the tool. Like when the internet came out, people were like, oh, the internet. But like the internet's allowed me to have clients in across the world, Japan, and in Europe. I would have never been able to reach out to those people and have this kind of dialogue. However, it's also a place where bad things are shared too. And I think with social media, so many people
A lot
are
of
looking.
comparing. And
Yeah. Oh, right. Because I mean, they have a term for it in psychology. They discovered. Do you know how many pictures it takes on Instagram before you have what they call insta anxiety, which is where you're like, I'm not that successful, I'm not that rich. Do you know how many pictures it takes?
3.
1.
One.
You hit one
I
picture.
knew
like,
you were going to say 1.
Yeah, it's small. 3 is maybe less for maybe more for some people, but the point is like they say,
I'm a seasoned Instagram.
yeah, you're like, I'm
Probably
3
built
times
up
more.
a tolerance, so it's 3 for me.
But it's true. It's like there's something that when we comparison creates chaos, and yeah, social media people put out their their
Best
highlights.
life, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even accurate or true, and I think a lot of people get further when they're authentic, but then
Absolutely.
but there's pressure in that.
Yeah.
And I think we jokingly say we've never wanted to become social media famous. So far we've been very successful at that, but because I had a guy that I met who was you should check him out. I think he goes by Mike Needs a Plan. He's a weight loss guy.
Okay.
He had a really authentic video, and I caught him just in the moment where he went from 20,000 to like 500,000.
Wow.
And we were chatting, and he burnt out because he's trying to please. You can't manage 500,000. Even if a third of them showed up, or even 10%, the largest number of people you can really at one time manage, according to Dunbar's number, is about 150. With chunking, that's like 500.
Wow.
To have authentic connections.
Yeah.
Over the year. And so 500 people. And so we always think we don't want clients. We want to help client. I can only sit in the room with a few people at a time and really to really help them grow to where they want and guide them to their understanding until they start to see it for themselves.
Right.
So people come in and say, "Oh, I'm broken." I'm like, "You're not." And they're like, "No, I am. Like, I'm messed up." I'm like, "No, you're not." And they argue with me, but so that's the problem with psychology. It presupposes that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. There's a reason behind it.
We see that you were complete to begin with,
Yeah.
and then putting stuff down that makes you feel like you're incomplete.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the real understanding of what this is about and how to navigate it purposefully with our real intelligence versus like what we've been told and labels that should describe us, but they start to define us, right? You hear it all the time in social media, and that's the psychology has become. Your boss isn't no longer a jerk; he's a narcissist, or you're no longer have a hard time focusing. You have ADHD self-diagnosis.
Yeah,
Like
everything has to be diagnosed.
everyone has to be
labeled.
those labeled, and then now that we label it, we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so we push against a lot against. I just saw how when I was in school, like how it folded in on itself. They realized the attention span's about 20 minutes. Classes were an hour and a half long. They realized the labeling theory is if you label a group, they behave that way. But the DSM-V is full of labels that any one of us can experience in just a moment, and then it becomes who we are rather than what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. Well, I have a question now.
Yeah.
If that's okay. So this is like, let's go a little deeper.
No, we only ask the questions.
You guys,
I'm not prepared for
this. Oh, we ask the questions here. So, yeah, it's good. None of us are prepared. We don't need to. No, it's not a challenge. That's great. I want to dive a little deeper because you recognize something, the difference between what they are and what they
Are labeled. Yeah.
Take a second to sit in that. And what if you were to take that and recognize that in every relationship, there's what people, the unreliable narrative of what we think we are and what we really are underneath the story, what we are under the mask. And if you applied that whole understanding to people before you see
yourself.
It's like the core to the
yes, and you see, and you see past what they drive. You see past their frustration, their mask,
Their
and
social media,
exactly,
their friend group.
Absolutely.
all of it, and you start to see that there's
There's a core to that.
The real
that
core.
tip thing.
Yeah.
Once you peel that onion, there's a lot of cores to that.
yeah. The it's
a thing.
it's a core. Yeah.
No, it's.
I had a client recently.
To
I had a client recently go back to their I'm gonna air quote therapist and say, no, I love that. It's bang on. And so because we're gonna go back to the core. I had someone say I went to back to my therapist after 4 months and told them like, I've healed working with you, and that's why I haven't seen them. And they were like very positive. Said, oh, good. What were your 2 takeaways?
Yeah.
And they answered, and she saw my face and went, was that the wrong answer? I said, no, the answer is fine. It was the question. There's not 2 takeaways. There's one. The takeaway is knowing the difference between who you are and who you thought you were.
Okay.
And so you thought you were something based off of all this. Your thinking gets put down, and what shows up instead of thinking is inspired thought from a place of truth.
Okay.
My answer right at this point would be, you are enough. That would be my answer.
Poosh.
Yeah. I do have a question.
Yeah.
Unless you guys want to talk about onions.
No, that was a good analogy. No, you seemed very
You
peel.
could tell it's
I learned
lunchtime.
that in counseling class.
I think
back
about
in the day
Shrek.
with counseling, I learned that to peel your client,
Yeah.
peel the.
Yeah, but there is
layers.
so all there is that core.
Ogres
The
are
la-
like
so there's
onions.
nothing to when we can look right into the core and past it. We
Yeah.
don't have to peel it. We're just like,
Right.
oh,
There's the core.
I don't have to peel an onion to know it's an onion. I
Yeah.
recognize an onion for what it looks
That's
like.
a
Yeah.
good analogy.
I
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
And
good.
so, anyways, you have a question. I want to hear it.
So my question is, because I do feel like this is kind of something that comes up really frequently and like amongst people around me and on social media, or I think this would just be helpful, not specifically for me, but just based on feedback. Because I think people get really caught up in their minds about like timelines.
Yeah.
Right, like timelines, like to have a house, to have a marriage, to have a
Oh, yeah.
child,
Yeah,
to have all these things, to have a job, to be this, that, to be all these things. Like, where would you start with somebody that?
We've had people come in and say, I'm not where I need to be. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, interesting. Where do you think you need to be?
I was just gonna say, where do you need to be?
Yeah, where do you need to be? So, and they think, well, I have to be successful on the other side of this situation.
Are you asking this question because of me?
I mean, if the shoe fits, but no, I think that
I
is-
think I know. I do think it is. I
do
want to hear
feel
about
like
it.
you,
It's true.
You do think that sometimes.
Well,
but
because my life was this. I was engaged. I had a child, and then
Oh.
my child died, and
Yeah.
I was no longer engaged. So I went through a fucking felt like a midlife crisis.
Well, identity crisis for
I'm like,
sure.
who the fuck am
Yeah.
I?
Yeah. Who are you?
Who am I? This person?
Who are
and I
you?
still struggle with that too.
You are everything you were before. The only difference is the outside changed. And when we attach ourselves to outside things,
Mm-hmm.
it's fragile because we believe it means something to have those things.
Yeah, yeah.
So for people that don't have a home, are they not good people?
Yeah.
Are they not complete? We
Yeah.
go to third world countries and go, oh, they're the happiest we ever have. They're the happiest they could be. And they have nothing. And we don't realize what we're saying.
Yeah.
The pain comes from the attachment of external things and
Yeah.
believing if we have them. So what if you had those things, if those things reoccur, you have a home, you're engaged and you have another child or whatever. What would you have then that you don't have now?
I mean, I think I would have like the physical things.
That's it. But those things can be lost again,
Yeah.
and it's the attachment. All pain comes from attachment to something. We don't have to rebuke it and be like, I don't want those things, but to recognize like they're not who we are. They're just part of the experience. And so when people say I need a home or this to be happy, guess what? How many times in your past have you said, I'll be happy when, or
Yeah.
tied, and
All
then
the
you
time.
get those things. Are you happy?
I mean,
Take a second. When you had those things that you said you wanted, yes, there's an
Yeah.
initial moment of excitement.
Yep.
But then how long did it take before anxiety and fear and stress came
Yeah.
in that you might lose those things, or you won't, or you can't maintain them, or
Very
what will people
quickly.
think, or I need a better thing now. It's like I
Yeah,
have a house, I need a bigger
something
home. I have a
else,
car, I need a
what's
nicer. And so
again, the
that's
chase.
yes, the external stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's where life is messed up for most people. They believe that if they accomplish something outside of them, that they'll feel the way they want. And that's pretty much like more than half my client base. I was that. I had nothing. I grew up in my home when I was born. I had a bed with springs poking out of it with an Arctic sleeping bag, military issued, that my stepfather, I slept in because we couldn't turn the heat on. And I remember getting my first apartment, and the girl I was dating at the time was mad that I without her knowing, because I was given the right to make the choice. It was a great, affordable place in Belleville, but the porcelain in the bathroom was pink, and I loved it. I didn't
Yeah.
care. And she was mad about that, but I was crying because I flushed the toilet with the handle, and it would flush, because in my house you had to dump it with a bucket.
Wow.
We lived and my mom used to think we were working class, and it is what it is. But I would not have friends over. I was embarrassed of my living situations, and then I thought, well, one day I'll escape, and then I did. And I had all the things. I had the nice watch and the nice car and the
Yeah.
fancy suits and all that, and
There's still
nothing
wasn't much.
changed
Yeah.
because it was just outside stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have to keep that stuff, and you have to, and then you're like, well, none of that stuff it brings moments of pleasure and joy
Yeah,
for a second and
absolutely.
excitement, but then that's quickly replaced by anxiety, stress, and being unhappy.
But do you think it also didn't change because like you're still that person, but do you think it's because you also hadn't at that point dealt with like the grief and shame as a child?
I worked through some of that stuff, but
Yeah.
what it came down to was like running away. It was all identity based,
Mm-hmm.
because it was based off, if I change my identity, it'll change my feelings. No. So I'm not opposed to having nice things now. but I'm not attached to them the same way. Like I need that because
Yeah.
I want to be cool, or I want to be liked, or I want to be seen as successful. Because we're not afraid to. Number one fear people say is I'm afraid to fail. You're not afraid to fail. You fail all the time in your life in private. You're afraid to look like a failure.
Yeah.
You're afraid this
Show it.
won't work. You're afraid people won't listen. You're afraid you'll never be happy. So you start clinging onto stuff to hope that's made, because it brings temporary, like shopping therapy. It brings temporary relief.
Love shopping.
Yeah, and I enjoy moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not tied to it. So now, like, I actually don't buy a lot of things. But if I do, like, if I have if I want to buy a pair of shoes, I don't buy a cheap pair.
We've seen your closet, Morgan. We know you buy some shoes.
Do you have a bit of a shoe addiction?
When I was working in finance, I was known for the flamingo. I always went like the nice socks and the pocket squares that matched and the tie that was worth more than most people's shirts. And, but not because I just thought I had to dress the part, because they say you're selling money, look like money. But that ostracized me as much. When I first started in the company, I had a Pontiac Sunfire that was beat up, and someone said, you need to get a car, man. I'm like, it's paid off. I'm saving my money. I'm doing what we tell people to. You're recruiting. You got to look like money. And then I went from that to a Cadillac CTS, and I had people hate me for that too. And I realized it doesn't matter what you have. You're going to have people judge you whether you
Regardless.
have it.
Oh, this guy
so then
thinks
have
he's
what
better
you
than most.
right, and then not care about that, because I don't care what people think I have. I never, really, I didn't even buy it for them. I bought it because I enjoyed it, but then I saw that you couldn't please him no matter what.
Yeah.
Right.
And
That's very true. I love that.
he can't. I won't work with him. He's not very successful. Oh, I'm not going to work with the same guy. I can't work with him. He doesn't need it anymore. Like there was a middle ground of success in the YGK that was like, oh, I have to be, medium successful for them to like me. And then you just play this game, and then you realize it doesn't matter about accomplish. So acquire those things if you want, but not as part of who you are, just because it's part of what you want is to experience, but not be attached to it. Yeah, or thinking that it's going to make you feel different. Yeah. So in other words, happiness can sit on this couch, and then I put that into action. That becomes fulfillment. Okay. And so once we know that we're happy in our being and that's what we are, we can put that into action rather than believing that we're looking for happiness out there. That it's hidden under the couch cushions or something, or in status, and which is why, like, look how many successful celebrities commit suicide. We know that there's nothing there, right? They're evidence of that. When we could sit here for 5 minutes and name Kate Spade, Anthony Bourdain, Chester.
Thought of Anthony Bourdain first one.
Did you? Yeah. Robin Williams. Like you start to boom, boom, boom. You stack it on. You're like, why would they do that? Avicii. Avicii was one of the reasons why I left the financial world and did this, because we were engaged at an Avicii concert, my wife and I. And then I was in Toronto, and I was sitting down going to a convention, and a young lady came up and she goes, do you listen to EDM? And I'm like, electric dance music? Because I knew but I was older than her. It was a weird question. I was like, yeah. I was like, my wife and I got engaged. We go to festivals, we dance. We love that kind of music. She was like, oh, I got engaged at an Avicii concert. She said, Avicii killed himself today. Wow. And I wrote my wife, I said, did you hear? And she said, how many more people need to die before you do something about it? Yeah. And that was kind of my call to action.
That was like, I need to do something.
Yeah. It trickled on me. Like, I'm pretty thick, so it had to come down in massive raindrops rather than one moment. But that's definitely a moment.
That's okay, though. You get there.
Yeah.
Good.
Wow. I'm
wow, there's another
another one. I'm
like,
just shocked. Like, this is great. This is wonderful. I just feel like, I feel like we could go on forever.
We do
part 2?
Talk about
we could definitely do part 2.
I'm open to that. I would love to.
We love doing part 2.
Thank you for coming with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
I think that it's been
Thank you for
a
being
really
open to it.
like nice glimpse into the work that you do. Are you taking clients right now?
I am. I have a couple spaces available,
tell
which
us.
is uncommon. Tell us what. Here's how you find me. blacksheepthinking.ca. Send me a honestly, we bring you in for a meeting and we show you right off what it is for pro bono. We just give you one meeting to taste it. And if you want to continue on, we'd love to build a relationship and help you find happiness. If you're lost or feel stuck, the majority of my clients, there's 2 that I work with primarily. We have other coaches to help in different situations, but I work with people that feel like they're not feeling as happy as they want, and life is challenging and they're starting to lose hope. But there's a large percentage of people that have most of the things in life they thought they wanted and don't feel complete. They feel there's something missing. And those are the 2 primarily, but I've dealt with all sorts of different cases. There's nothing, whatever's happening, this is getting in the way. And you can find this Black Sheep Thinking on any social platform, really, but really just send me an email, Morgan at blacksheepthinking.ca, and do our intake form on our website.
Well, we'll stay tuned for part 2 then. And follow, subscribe us as well.
Yeah, please do.
Because we always
shout
forget
out to
to
your
say
girls
that
at the Gwen Effect.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you.